Hello, welcome to the second part of this Al Jazeera news special, Libya on the Line, the War Retold. I'm Nick Clark. Al Jazeera has obtained the phone wiretaps of two members of Muammar Gaddafi's inner circle. The phones belong to this man, the Prime Minister al-Baghdadi al-Mahmoudi, and the long-time Gaddafi loyalist Tayyip el-Safi. Our team went through more than 12,000 intercepted conversations. The recordings took place during Libya's revolution and war between February and June of last year. Gaddafi himself calls in regularly. Listen to him now, plotting how to circumvent an embargo and profit from Libyan oil.
زي السنة المخدرات صحيح صحيح بنحاول واجدين مغامرين يعني يشغلونكم بتخفيض وهم مش بالحضر ما الحضر ما تو نشوف شبكات أكثر شيء هذا على قلت لك أنا بدري ضروري نبعث ناس لماليزيا وإندونيسيا ولا سنغافورة ولا المناطق هذه غصب عنهم لا تنباع هي ما عندناش مشكلة لكن زي ما قلت لك تبي ما احنا كدولة ما نبانش الصورة لكن نحاولوا من خلال التجار والسماسرة هذا ممكن نديروا حاجة يعني في مغامرين ممكن ضروري نشغلوا طرف تانوك البريقة ضروري نبدأ.
There they are, the uncensored words of Muammar Gaddafi. All of Gaddafi's inner circle can be heard on the recordings. Let's take you through some of the characters. First up, Saif al-Islam, Gaddafi's son and heir apparent. He's the man who took charge of the reform plans that fell out of favour with the Libyan public. Listen to him now talking about how to deal with the opposition leader, Mustafa Abdel Jalil.
في قول ان عمود صاحب جديد بيجي روما يوم الاثنين والثلاث وهذه كويسه جيت روما هذه كويسه طبيان روما في المافيات طيبه في جهد ممكن ينضاع هيك وفي جهد ممكن ينضاع هيك.
And in this next recording, Saif al-Islam raises the idea of human shields with the Prime Minister. Another major player is Tayyip el-Safi, one of the phone owners. He was close confidant of Muammar Gaddafi for at least 20 years. He's now in hiding in Egypt. And Gaddafi put him in charge of quashing the uprising in the east. And we hear him here speaking to the intelligence chief, Abdullah Sanusi, warning him about the handling of the uprising in Misrata.
هو عيب يا عبد الله عيب الخبر هذا والله كان الفروق راجع ماشيين يا عبد الله في اتجاه مستلم.
Then Gaddafi's Prime Minister al-Baghdadi al-Mahmoudi, he's now in custody in Tunisia, where he fled after the regime collapsed. And the recordings document his often desperate efforts to garner international support, and that'll be the focus of much of this programme. We'll also be hearing from Khalid Qaim, the Deputy Foreign Minister, as well as a number of more mysterious callers taking part in the diplomatic drama. All right, let's now examine the recordings of Baghdadi al-Mahmoudi, the Prime Minister, during the unfolding diplomatic disaster in the first months of 2011.
He was a key member of Gaddafi's inner circle. Al-Baghdadi al-Mahmoudi stood by Gaddafi until the very end. But 1 month into the revolution, and it was clear whose side the world was on. Nearly a decade of détente was forgotten. The United Nations voted on Resolution 1973, a document that opened the door for NATO to attack.
يعني منتهى الصفاقة ومنتهى العمل.
والله لا حوشة ينحرق المفروض واهله ينحرقوا. والله نحرق نار كبيرة ونحطوا فيها أهله ونفسه. مش تقعد للتاريخ بس.
هذا يا سيدي ما كسبناه من السيد مصطفى الجديد. أجواءنا قاعدة تلعب الفرنسويين والطليان والأمريكان يراو فيها.
The Prime Minister led the regime's efforts to build a network of international allies. Even after the UN resolution was passed, there was still hope that the tide could be turned.
متاع الجابون ومتاع نيجيريا نبي ضروري يكلمني كان تحصلوه كلموني حتى تو.
قلت لك تو كنت تتكلم في الألمان.
ايه
قلت لهم احنا درنا رسائل ودرنا كذا، قالوا هذه كلها ما فيهاش تفاصيل كيف بتديروا كيف بتوقفوا كيف آليات التوقيف. المهم قال لي الامور راهي سيئه ضدكم والمفروض تديروا حاجه بسرعه، واقترح علي قال لي ان تو وزير خارجيتكم يكلم وزير خارجيه المانيا ويتفاهموا معاه، وبعدين يكلم وزير خارجيه بريطانيا وبعدين فرنسا. انا شو قلت لهم؟ قلت لهم انتم قاعدين انتم طالبين باشياء، قولنا كيف نديرها، قولوا كيف تضمن الطرف الاخر يوقف، شنو التفاصيل الفنيه اللي كيف نحموا جيشنا، كيف نحموا مواطنينا، كيف نديروا، كيف نحفظ، يعني نبغوا تساعدونا في التفاصيل هذه.
ما قالوش كان النقاش اللي داير الان؟
النقاش ضدنا رسمي انه هو الان كله على فرض حظر جوي وضمان ما يبغوش يخشوا بنغازي هم، وبعدين تقديم خطاب القائد انه اعطى تعليمات على الهواء مباشره بان الجيش يخش بنغازي.
يقول لهم يبي يكلمكم على اساس
لا سيد الاسلام مش حيقبل.
انا حنكلمهم انا
قلت والله كويسين، انت تشجع فيهم وهم كويسين.
لا ماشيين كويس، ماشيين، وبعدين حتى رعايتهم للنقاش الحوار اللي بيدور بيننا ما عندناش مانع، يكونوا كمراقبين فيهم ما ماشي.
لا معقول، لا معقول.
احنا لو نقولها لك ترى اللي دايرينها احنا بس مش معلنين عليه، يعني البيانات اللي كانت نملكها من نادي الدستور فيصدوا هذا الدستور.
صح.
نادوا بحرية الصحافة، هذه حرية الصحافة. نادوا بالمجتمع المدني، هذا المجتمع المدني. قلت له بدري للأمين العام، قلت له آخرتها تعال جيب مراقبين، احنا حتى المدن اللي تقولوا انتم محتلين نحموا في المدنيين.
الروس ماشي اخبار في الموسيقى.
ما عندناش يا ودي، الصيني كلمته مرتين ثلاثة ما عندهمش، حركة بطيئة أخوي.
Perhaps some of Baghdadi's most difficult moments as prime minister were during the siege of Misrata. The battle became a public relations disaster for a government claiming it was only fighting armed gangs and Al-Qaeda. Privately, the prime minister acknowledged that the government policy of arming civilians had backfired.
جماعة تورغة هذول اللي سلحناهم يخشوا غادي يحرقوا لك الدنيا كلها. قال لك كان توقفوا جماعة تورغة ما عادش يخشوا، هم بروحهم يقتلوا، حتى الجنود والله ما يكلموا. لأن تورغة يخشوا يخنبوا ويشعلوا في النار.
هاي تورغة.
باي هذه كلها اللي الوقت كلهم رام تورغة.
It was Gaddafi's son Khamis who was leading military operations in Misrata. More than 10,000 government loyalists had been deployed. The audio clips revealed that the regime might have been led into believing that a pullout from Misrata could lead to its salvation.
تكلمت مع الأتراك توا، الموضوع مرفوم في مصراتة، أرجوك ورسخوا قدر ما تستطيع قدوة يفكوني من، لأن كل شيء انتهى بوقف إطلاق النار، وانتهينا من الحلف نفس الشيء، وكل إجراءاتنا وخلينا لو مصراتة غدوة. أوكي هذه المهمة أهم نقطة أساسية. والله ساعة شدني على التليفون، والله ساعة شدني على التليفون، يعني قال لي كل شيء اللي تديروا فيه صح وماشيين كويس، وهاكم قابلت المبعوث العام ومشي مبسوط، واليوم رد عليكم واحنا كل نتابعوا في الواحد. غدوة انا والله بعد غدوة بعد وزير الخارجية اللي هي افارق بنسق معاه، لكن موضوع هذه بتاع مصر هاي خميس خلاص تكلمت مع جماعته بدري بلغته وانا جماعة بيترو.
But the war continued. NATO bombings over Tripoli intensified. Gaddafi's compound and several administrative buildings were hit. Members of the government started to move around the capital, from this building to the Ministry of Planning to the Ministry of Health. The airstrikes were having an impact and they were feeling unsafe meeting in government buildings. They also had to be more and more cautious about what they were discussing over the phone. So they had to look for alternatives. And one of the safest options was to meet outside of Tripoli, away from military targets. Eventually, they ended up choosing a country house belonging to a foreign ministry official as their meeting place. During that time, the prime minister grew more and more anxious.
صعبة شوية ما تحملناش، أنا بالنسبة لي ما أقدرش أتحملها والله.
ممكن تركينا لازم ناكل اختيار متعمد يعني.
يعني متعمد. ايوه.
الو دكتور، عفوا مؤخر بالليل.
تفضل.
اخذت معلومات اكثر هلا من اصحابي، هدول عاملين خطه مع القطريين مراهنين على 4 ل 6 أسابيع. على أساس ب4 6 أسابيع رح يضربوا ضربات كتير قوية. وإنهم قايلين للأمريكان أعطونا 4 ل 6 أسابيع النظام بينتهي وكل شيء بيخلص. موضوع الفلوس القطريين عم بيحلوه، عم بيقولوا أي مبلغ بينصرف من هون ل6 أسابيع نحن بنتكفل فيه من ناتو. نصيحتي ونصيحة أصحابي قد ما فيكم هال6 أسابيع بدكم حاولوا تكونوا مش معروفين وين أنتم موجودين. يصير في يعني حماية لكم أكثر من اللازم، وتكونوا مخبيين أكثر من اللازم، ما حدا يعرف التحركات وكذا لكل الأقطاب، لأنه رح يحاولوا يعملوا يعني تصيد للشخصيات الكبيرة بالنظام.
Al-Baghdadi's loyalty to Gaddafi cannot be put in question. Listen to these 2 phone calls. The first one from a man with a Gulf accent, the second one from a Libyan.
البغدادي
من هون؟
كيف الحال يا أخوي؟
على البال كويس.
يعني ممكن تسمعني
تفضل.
على أساس أنك تطلع وتسلم بنفسك وترجع لأهلك وتعيش حياتك، وأنا أضمن لك السلامة.
هشم على روحك وسخ يا ابن الشت، أنا أبوك وأبو أصلك.
دكتور أنا واحد أنت داير معي جميل كبير هلبة قبل، ونبي ننصحك ونعود لك كلام يمكن الجماعة اللي كلموك أمس مرتين من قبل، والله إن بنقولوا لك إن نهاية الرجل راه قريب. وجودك معاهم هو ولد أنت وعبد الله تراه خطر عليك. وإذا كانت تطلع فالطريق آمن. لأن راهم مرفوضين. وراهم نبوك تطلع علينا جميل كبير معنا.
شكرا.
Still, the Prime Minister knew it was a losing battle. By the end of May, he seemed to have lost all hope.
المفروض مشيتوا في الكلام اللي قلت لكم أنا في البداية. هذه دولة معترفين بها وشبه اليوم يعترف بها واحد جديد.
أنا يولي الدولة هي ماشي.
Well, Mabrouk Khorshid is one of al-Baghdadi's lawyers, and I spoke to him one evening from Tunis. Mr. Khorshid, first of all, if I could ask you, how is Mr. Baghdadi right now?
First of all, I wished that Mr. Baghdad al-Mahmoudi had been present himself to have this interview with you. Due to his confinement and his inability to contact the outside world, prevented him from conveying his voice to the world.
If Libya could absolutely guarantee his safety and his security, would he then be prepared to stand trial in Libya?
How can Libya provide assurances of his safety in the face of the chaos, still special prisons and confinement, violations of human rights on a daily basis? All this exists in Libya. How can Baghdad al-Mahmoudi get assurances that he will not be offended or his human rights be violated?
That's Mabrouk Khorshid there. Now, many of the people on the Libya recordings are well known. Others are more of a mystery. Earlier on, we heard one man who goes by the name of Mohammed Ajami. He warned the Prime Minister that the NATO campaign was about to intensify. He was right, and we've been trying to find out more about him. Mohammed Ajami is believed to be an oil broker and did business with the Gaddafi regime. He speaks with a Lebanese accent, and he calls al-Baghdadi several times and appears to be acting as an intermediary with the Israeli government. Well, joining us now is Hoda Abdel Hamid, who's been through all these recordings with a fine tooth comb. And Hoda, what more do we know about this guy?
Well, as you said, he is a bit of a mystery man. We tried to reach him, we were not able to. He is an oil broker. He had a long-standing relation with the Libyan regime, and that obviously continued during the uprising. He starts calling Prime Minister al-Baghdadi al-Mahmoudi by end of April. And then there are several calls. One of the most interesting ones is just ahead of the visit of Prime Minister Netanyahu to the US, and he clearly says in that conversation that there have been some sort of that the Prime Minister had been approached, but Prime Minister Netanyahu was not very comfortable or was a bit afraid that it would be publicized and it would ruin his visit to the US. Listen to this.
بالنسبة للمكالمة التلفونية مع الكاونتر بارت عند الولاية العام عنده رحلة على أمريكا ب 20 هذا الشهر ب 22 راح يعمل سبيتش للجوينت هاوس الكونغرس والسنت. ما بده يعمل شيء تخربط له الرحلة تبعيته، بيفتكر إنه مكالمة تطلع علنية بالصحف يعني ممكن تأثر على رحلته على أمريكا بالوقت الحاضر.
يا مربوط علنية.
فكان شوي متردد يعني أقول لك بصراحة أنا حكيت معه بيرسونال، هو صديق لي من زمان لما كان بيبقى.
لا مربوط علنية حتى إحنا ما تلخبط علينا.
وبعدين قال لي رح يبعث لي واحد لو عندي هون يوم الاثنين اللي هو رئيس مكتب يوصل لعندي ماندي لنقعد نبحث بتفاصيل كثير يعني من ضمن اللي هم عم يعملوه شو أنا عملت بننفذ شوية خطوات وعم بيطلع مبادرة للسلام مع الفلسطينيين بهذا الخطاب.
لكن المهم انك انت ترتب معاه زي ما صار.
انا اللي جاي لعندي يوم الاثنين بخليه اذا بتحب يتكلم معك.
لكن نبي اجراءاتك يعني سريعه وتكون مردودها في اسرع.
But no mention of the Israelis there. How do you know that's who they're referring to?
Well, he says the cousins, and the cousins is a way among Arabs to describe the Israelis, and he refers to that several times in several conversations, and also when you compare the dates, it's clear who he's talking about. Now, early June, there's another conversation, and again he's talking about the cousins, this time about another delegation that is also arriving in Washington. It appears that Mohammed Ajami is in Washington at that point, and that delegation is of interest because it has good context on Capitol Hill.
أنا حبيت أقول لك شيء واحد بأكد لك اللي قلت لك يا رح نفذه. يعني عندي كل خطة العمل ورحت امبارح كنت عند أولاد عمنا. كل شيء تكلمنا فيه أنا واثق اللي وعدتك فيه رح نفذه. رح تشوف في تغيرات كثيرة على الأرض. يعني بدي إياك ما تكون مشغول بالك على الموضوع أبدا.
إن شاء الله.
بس ريحونا بس لحتى نقدر.
لا والله بكرة يكون عندك أكيد 100% بكرة يكون عندك.
الله. أنت بتعرف ثقتي فيك. أنا من أول يوم أنا ماشي معك لليوم على الساعة.
لا والله العظيم بكرة بأي طريقة. بكرة واشتغل وما فيش مشكلة على الإطلاق.
شكرا دكتور على خير.
كله تمام. رح تشوف ان شاء الله اخر الاسبوع رح تشوف نتائج كثير كويسه. في تحركات. اول فريق عمل وصل اليوم وثاني فريق عمل بيوصل بكره. في حوالي رح يكون هون حوالي 8 اشخاص 24 ساعه عم يشتغلوا على الموضوع من الجماعه اللي فعالين كثير بالكابيتال. من اولاد عمنا يعني بالاسماء اللي انا تكلمت فيهم معك لما كنت انا وياك.
ماشي تمام.
It's all very intriguing, isn't it? What's your reading of this?
Well, we don't know much more than that. We do know that they were trying. There was some sort of message that had to be carried. We don't know what that message is. The Prime Minister seemed very interested in it. He seemed to, when he was not in the office, he left message to his assistant to say, tell him to call back. So he was closely following that. We also know from the phone conversations that Mohammed Ajami was owed money. He asked for that money several times. I don't know whether he received that money or not. And we don't know whether he accomplished his mission or not. But we did ask the Israeli government, and the Israeli government said it would not comment on this report.
Well, more on the international involvement in just a second, but I just want to get onto the significant issue of oil and the part it played in the Libyan conflict. Some of the major battles on the ground, of course, focused on control of key oil facilities, but there were also suspicions that oil was the reason many Western countries were so keen on military intervention. Recordings suggest some kind of behind-the-scenes deal could have been made. Let's just listen to this clip of the Prime Minister al-Baghdadi al-Mahmoudi talking to Tayyip el-Safi.
اي مكان محمود شمام وبلغوا القطريين وبلغوا الفرنسيين وصاروا اتفاقيه مع الفرنسيين 35% من النفط الليبي يكون عند فرنسا في حاله انهم هم دعموهم استمروا ووصلوا الحكم.
Well, you heard the name of Mahmoud Shamam in that clip there, and he was the head of NTC's head of information at one point in time. And pleased to say he's in the studio right now. It's interesting listening to that, Mahmoud, the Prime Minister saying that at the behest of the NTC, you agreed to supply 35% of Libyan oil to the French if they continue to support the uprising. Is that true?
Flatly false, and this is an old joke. It happened a few months ago, and it was circulated on the internet. Then some French newspaper tried to use it against Sarkozy.
So you're suggesting that this is just a fabrication, that these voices aren't real, it's not them at all?
At all, and nobody has this authority. And thanks God, after 6 months now of this allegation, everybody knows that the Libyan oil are the ownership of Libyan people.
But come on, you must have been trying to cut deals all over the place to try and keep the momentum going. You must have been, surely.
Never, at least not from my part. Never.
What do the recordings say about other countries' involvement? What about Turkey? It is the only Muslim majority country that's a member of NATO. In this recording between the intelligence chief Abdullah Sanusi and the Prime Minister Baghdadi al-Mahmoudi, both men appear surprised and angry at Turkey's involvement. They also suggest that Turkey was directly carrying out airstrikes with financial assistance from Qatar.
قلت هذا الناس اللي تموتوا فيه وانتم وانتم اللي ضربتونا البارح ضربتوا معمر القذافي اللي يعتبر امام المسلمين واحنا هنعلن للاتراك وللشعب التركي بان الطائرات التركيه هي اللي تضرب في ليبيا. قلت له قال القطريين فجعوا بانهم هم يمولوا فيكم للعمليات الخاصه بضرب ليبي.
So that's Turkey. What about Qatar's role? Qatar was crucial to the whole enterprise, and this was a real surprise to the regime, and that becomes very apparent in the clips. Listen to this call between Tayyip al-Safi and a Libyan who apparently had very close contacts with the Qatari government.
احنا صار لنا مشكله احنا والقطريين، مانيش عارف شنو هي المشكله، ربما كلام منقول بلا كلام كذا الى اخره، عش نبوا اي سوء علاقه بيننا وبين القطريين. وبنردوا حبايب زي قبل ثاني، عرفتوا؟ نعم. لا يجوشورنا لا يجوشورهم يتامروا علينا نتامروا عليهم، عرفتوا؟ تمام. القطريين كانوا يخشوا بين الليبيين، يخشوا بالخير.
Well, Mahmoud Shaman, you can well imagine their surprise at Qatar going against them, because the Emir had a personal relationship, didn't he, with Gaddafi. They sat together at summits and so forth. So why was Qatar so resolute, do you think?
I think it's the friendship, the brotherhoods, and some other interests too. Qatar is playing a major role now for solving conflicts in the world and active role in foreign policy around the world, and we see that the Qatari role are now repeating with some little bit differences in Syria and in other places. So this is a major role for the foreign policy of the Qatar.
I'm just wondering, did you talk very briefly there about the strategic interest? Just expand a bit more on that. What is it that Qatar would have got out of this?
I think that the major motive of Qatar is to helping Libyan people, and a lot of Libyans think that if Qatar has interest in Libya, of course every country has interest, and they have to protect their interest, or they have to enjoy whatever they got from the results of the Libyan victory.
A month later, Tayyip vehemently lashed out at the Qataris. Have a listen to this.
القطريين راعي اللي تقدر تخلقها الكم السعوديه، اكثر من الكلام الفاضي ده. قال لي والله غير تفاهم انتم السعوديه يا اخي نقوم الكم هم اللي يعرفوهم ويعرفوا دينهم.
At that stage, as I say, Qatar was sending in weapons and training advisors and so forth, which is actually way above the mandate of the resolution. Weapons were being used and so forth.
The Qataris gave us logistic supports. And they related those logistic supports to protect the civilians. So they were implied the Security Council resolution by training people to defend themselves, training to guard the revolution, but never was involved on the ground by sending troops or anything like this.
All right, Mahmoud Shaman, we'll leave it there for the time being, but back to you just in a moment or two. Okay, let's move on to another major topic of regime chatter in the recordings, and that's NATO's campaign in Libya. And just to remind you, NATO bombs started to fall on Libya on March the 19th, 2011. That was just 2 days after the UN Security Council adopted Resolution 1973, which of course imposed a no-fly zone over the country. It also authorized member states to take all necessary measures to protect civilians. It also tightened the arms embargo adopted back in February. But the embargo stoked a debate over whether it was legal to supply arms to rebel forces. The issue was never sorted out, but the recordings make clear the supplies of arms were reaching the opposition and that NATO was complicit in this. Have a listen.
فيه باخرة شبه ليبية اسمها الخروبة. طالعة من بنغازي جاي مصرات. تدعي أنها جايبة مواد غذائية. وعليها صحفيين منهم فرنسويين ومنهم 4 صحفيين ولا هي 5 الباخرة نفسها. وبعدين مروا من الحلف وقفوهم الحلف قالوا مش عندكم ولا عندنا مواد إنسانية. الصحفيين يقولوا الباخرة عليها شوية مواد غذائية صح لكن عليها أسلحة وصواريخ عليها مقاتلين. طلعت من الناتو.
المصريين بكرة وبلغوا حتى الأوروبيين توصية الجنان والتراك على المنفذ. إذا تراه احنا تبرق خش من سلاح وبعدين المتطوعين الأجانب وهذا البي بي سي والسنين جابوه الإذاعة جابوا العراقيين والفلسطينيين والأردنيين والمصريين. أيوة حماس جميل حزب الله.
اليوم يا سيدي أعلنوا أخوتك المصرية أنهم مسكوا سلاح في السلوم جاي من الخطر ماشي ليبيا وخير هذا كويس مرات نجي رحنا وياهم خطة مشتركة لتأمين حدودنا وتأمين حدودهم.
ورد مستعد يعني تو يكلموا في موجات تقول احنا الناتو ما فيش خسارة واحد دام متردد. احنا عندنا حلين. يا كنا الخسارة تبغى غادي تسمح بدخول الامدادات الإنسانية تمنع السلاح أو وراهم نضطر نخش الميلان نستدر قوة. في خيارات لأن السلاح يخش كل يوم. وإحنا يكلموا فينا الناس وراهم نضرب قطعة والتحرك. وردنا أدرك أنا مضحك.
Well, we approached NATO for a response to those recordings. This is what they had to say. NATO commanders at sea enforced the UN-mandated arms embargo without bias to deny those who attack civilians the ability to import weapons into Libya. It was the Gaddafi regime, not the opposition forces, who systematically attacked civilians. NATO did not take sides in the conflict. It goes on to say, we made clear from the start that if anti-Gaddafi forces started to harm civilians, we would have to consider means that would prevent such an outcome. And you can read the full statement from NATO on our website, aljazeera.com. Now, earlier I spoke to Ronnie Brauman, the former president of Médecins Sans Frontières. He was an early critic of the job that NATO was doing in Libya. Mr. Brauman, do you believe that Gaddafi could have offered a negotiable position early on that could have changed the mind of the international community?
There is one thing that we can be sure of, and this thing is that diplomacy, negotiations, political mediation was brushed aside just in the first instance. By the date that this recording was made, Libyan human rights activists very closely linked to the TNC were asserting that 6,000 people had already been murdered by Gaddafi's forces. And this turned out to be entirely false, as Human Rights Watch and Amnesty International have shown. There were about 200 to 300 people who'd been killed. And this is, of course, much too much, but this had nothing to do with this 6,000 dead. So there was, the propaganda was beating the drums, and in the meanwhile, Gaddafi seemed to become aware that he was entirely isolated on the international stage. And this is probably the main lesson that can be drawn from this.
But earlier I spoke to the Italian former Foreign Minister, Franco Frattini, on NATO's role in Libya as Gaddafi was struggling for survival. And this is what he had to say.
Well, we tried. African Union tried. The Arab League tried. Even some of those that were considered some, I would say, facilitators, envoys, tried to contact the Libyan regime, but they refuse anyway any kind of serious negotiations, including with the African Union. This is why, at the end of the day, even the Arab League decided to go ahead.
Mr. Frattini, I'm going to play you a couple of clips now, audio clips, and the first one is Saif al-Islam talking to Khalid al-Hakimi, the Deputy Foreign Minister, saying that NATO were on the ground in Mali and Mauritania, south of Libya. Have a listen to this.
والله هم مفتحين شويه في موضوع المبادرات، حتى كان في قصه زي اللي عملوها في موريتانيا ومالي المره اللي فاتت وجربوها ما نجحتش، وهذا يمكن يغري القاعده في المنطقه، يبدو كل مره يخطفوا لهم حد. هي مره كان ما تمشيش، هم اصلا عندهم فريق رايح حتى من كم يوم، عندهم لي اكثر من شهر نازلين مجموعه في بين مالي وبين الجزائر في المثلث.
You think that these NATO ground operations may have been taking place in Mauritania and Mali, and if that's the case, in what sense were they protecting civilians in Libya? It's curious, isn't it?
I don't know whether there were NATO operations, but I exclude this because this is to my knowledge. But I said, NATO was involved exclusively to protect by air operation, not by ground operation, but all with possible means tended to protect, for example, flows of people trying to escape from militias of regime. And this maybe could happen in the border areas between Libya and Mauritania, between Libya and Mali, because these are desertic areas where many civilians were killed by the militias of the regimes.
Okay, Mr. Frattini, I'm going to play you Saif al-Islam and Khalid al-Hakimi again, saying the Italian companies would be welcomed back into Libya if Italy would stop their involvement in the conflict.
علاش مصوتين؟ ما هو هم تصويت دايرين البرلمان ضد الحرب على ليبيا وسحب القوات من افغانستان. ما قالك احنا الامكانيات، ما عادش عندنا امكانيات باش نغطوا مصاريف الحرب اللي صايره تو حاليا. يا الله نغطوا مصاريف الشركات اللي فلتن واللي عليها ديون، والشباب حاليا دايرين دوشه كل يوم مسيره من غير عمل.
جماعه الشركات شوفهم كل الشركات لا كلهم جايين اتصالات وقولوا تفضلوا تعالوا يخدموا كذا عرفتوا؟ خليهم يجوا ووقفوا العدوان هذا ويتوكلوا على الله.
When Saif al-Islam Gaddafi says contact the Italians and let them know that the companies are welcome back if the aggression is stopped. Was that contact ever made, as far as you know?
Italian companies knew at that time that the government was very well determined. I took a decision. The government of Italy backed me. The president of Italian Republic backed me, and so no, I would say, suggestions, no advices could persuade me to stop protecting Libyans because of some economic interest. But at the end of the day, as I repeat, also on the point of view of economic interest, we were right.
Now, the conversations coming up were mostly intercepted on Tayyip el-Safi's phone. Gaddafi put his long-time loyalist in charge of putting down the rebellion in the east. Gaddafi's son, Saif al-Islam, he calls in regularly, as do at least 4 individuals who seem to be placed in and amongst the protesters themselves, but they're definitely in with the Gaddafi side.
هم قلة إرهابية بتحول ليبيا إلى إمارات تبع الظواهري ولا تبع بن لادن.
At the time, Gaddafi's statements seemed like wild exaggerations.
داير لحية يقول لهم النسوان ما عادش يطلع اعتباره من اليوم، قريت النكسة. وقالوا يجيبوا لي التبرعات أنا يا خليفة.
Blaming the budding Libyan revolution on al-Qaeda fighters appeared to most of the world like a scare tactic by a leader desperate to gain support from the international community.
تبغوا بلادكم زي الصومال زي العراق، نفس المجموعة اللي خربت هذه البلدان هي اللي دخلت ليبيا الآن.
Even here in Libya, many thought it was a ploy to scare off Western powers. Gaddafi might have exaggerated both in message and delivery, but there was real concern there. Listen to how members of the regime were describing among themselves the protesters when they first took to the streets here in Benghazi.
هم دايرين فيه كبار، هذه مشاكل منظمين يعني، حتى هتافاتهم عادي يعني، مش هتافات بتاع واحد يبي اصلاح وتطوير وكذا. يقولوا في كلام مش كويس يعني صراحه.
والله شنو يقولوا يا سالم؟
يقولوا لا اله الا الله ومعمر عدو الله. هيك اخوان مسلمين يا راجل، فيهم قدامهم مجموعه اخوان مسلمين يكون فيهم. ما هو اتجاهين هم اللي طلعوا في الشارع، اخوان مسلمين والفروق هذين، مو مجاهدين بلافتاتهم ويهتفوا بهتافات اسلاميه، عرفتوا؟
ايوه. يا سيدي الشعب يريد اسقاط النظام.
كم عددهم؟
سلموا عليه 600 واحد تقريبا، لكن عبد الله نقضوا عليهم بدري خيره. يديروا كل شيء، يجيبوا في السلاح ويجيبوا في هذا شو اسمه المنتوف هذا ولا شو اسمه، عرفت الجزائز هذا عرفته؟ وفروق مدربين وهذول مقدمتهم الزنادقه، هذول مقدمتهم الزنادقه قاعدين يحصوا فيهم ومعلمين ومع صارهم ويعطوا في فلوس للعيال وميه ومشروب وعمل منظم مدعوم.
هم نحن.
That was us, but we're no different than other people. If you call us Islamists, okay, but we're sophisticated Islamists. Yes, we fought, but we didn't create an Islamic state. We helped lead the protests. We were providing water and juice and chanting the slogans.
Ismail Sallabi heads one of the most effective brigades that fought to defeat government forces. He spent time in Gaddafi's jails. He says there was only one difference between people like him and the rest of the protesters.
If we went to the streets, we'd immediately call for Gaddafi's downfall. That's what we decided. Other people wanted to make their demands gradually and gauge reaction. For us, it was all or nothing. So we called for the fall of the regime on February the 15th.
قلت لك انا عمري عاوز شي مناشير وزعوا فيهم في بنغازي. يقولوا نحن اللي قتلنا في افغانستان. وقتلنا في البوسنه. وقتلنا في كذا وقتلنا في كذا. واحنا اللي كنا وراء العمل هذا.
أكيد في شباب كانوا في أفغانستان.
For sure there were people who'd been in Afghanistan. They were jailed but afterwards had a normal life. Anyone who wants the support of the West while repressing his people uses Al-Qaeda as an excuse.
As the protests turned violent and the violence led to war, the audio recordings revealed that regime officials did believe they were fighting armed religious extremists.
طرح بيك وخليكم قاعدين صاقرين في النسوان بتاعكم، صاقرين حذانا انتم يا صفص ناس في التريس، انتم ماكم عاد الرجاله، الرجاله اعطونا البنادق خلينا نطلع احنا نقاتلوا. شو الاخبار مشرف؟
والله ان شاء الله كويسه. في اخبار كثير تقول ان يعني سمعناها ولكن قالوا ممكن تكون مؤكد لان في جماعه من جماعه القاعده حزب الله.
نعم.
ربما دخلوا وربما بعض منهم موجود.
كان هناك أيضا.
I've never said this before, but people from other Arab countries came at the beginning to fight the jihad in Libya. But when they realized it was a people's revolution and that we only wanted weapons, they went back to their countries and left the matter to Libyans alone.
By the end of the war, it was clear that Islamists had played a crucial role on the front line. Many of the fighters were from Derna. Gaddafi himself mentioned this several times. So we came here to figure out who these people are and what they want from the new Libya. This eastern city was at the heart of the first armed uprising against Gaddafi back in the 1990s. The response was brutal. People here say government forces really went house to house, just as Gaddafi threatened to do during last year's conflict.
During Gaddafi's rule, I was considered a terrorist.
Salem Darbi was on the run for 10 years. He led a brigade of 600 men during the revolution. In times of peace, Salem is a business owner. He used to run this shop with his brother Mehdi, who was killed during the crackdown in the 1990s.
It was different in the 1990s and 1980s. We tried to have small revolutions that were really Islamic in nature. This one was not.
Abdel Hakim al-Hassadi agrees. He fled to Afghanistan, he says, to escape repression at home. Saif al-Islam cited him as proof that last year's uprising was led by Al-Qaeda elements.
He tried to use the fact that I was in Afghanistan, so I had to be from Al-Qaeda. If the world had believed him, they would have supported Gaddafi against us. We were the first people to carry weapons. We got them quickly. Libyans didn't understand war. War needs planning and rules. It's not something you can just improvise.
But even in the new Libya, many people view Derna with suspicion. The city is still reputed to be a hotbed of religious extremism.
The media can come here and see. I am sitting with a woman without a veil, and we don't have a problem, but we do have our opinion. We won't accept a constitution that is not based on Islamic law. No Islamist can raise his weapon against Sharia. But if there is one article in the new constitution that goes against Sharia, then I will fight it.
Many of the former fighters complain about the label that remains stuck to them.
If they are looking for Al-Qaeda, they should really look somewhere else. We just want to apply the rule of God, which calls for peace and understanding. When you keep on repeating Al-Qaeda over and over again, you will actually push people to cross that line.
So what do they want now that their enemy is gone?
Sharia doesn't mean fighting America and the West. We can cooperate with the West on many things, but we have our own way.
We want a modern country and a civil society, not the type of Islamic law that scares people off. Sharia means equality and fairness. Women can leave the house, they can work and teach and drive. There is a middle way.
Libya is slowly recovering from the ruin of war. New voices are determined to have a say in the yet-to-be-drafted constitution and the emerging political system. What comes from that process will determine whether Gaddafi's words were all stereotypes or real predictions.
Mahmoud Shamam, Gaddafi certainly seems to have exaggerated about the number of extremists in the ranks of the rebels, but there's a certain amount of truth in it as well.
Of course, the Libyan revolution gave opportunity to every faction, if I may say, to participate on saving the country.
So how hard was it for you as information minister at that time to hide the reality that there were so-called Islamists in the ranks of the rebels?
We did not try to hide it. What we said in that time exactly, that we are all Muslims, Libyans there is no differentiation, no sectors, nothing. So this is Libyan revolution, and in a matter of fact, the first days of the revolution, the people who were actually on the streets are ordinary young people from
right,
all
but there
sides.
were others as well, weren't we? As we saw in Hoda's package there were fighters from Afghanistan and other places too.
Some of them. She chose to, if she wants to talk to some people who were not were in Afghanistan, there will be most of the Libyan people were not in Afghanistan.
But they were there.
So if you picked up few people and give them the example, no.
But they were there, and I think it's important as we look to the future of Libya now and the problems that they face and the potential threat that many say that so-called Islamists will potentially railroad Libya's future.
The people who went in Afghanistan from every country, as a matter of fact, the people who went to Afghanistan from your country, Great Britain is more than who went from Libya. United States is the same case. So there is some people went to Afghanistan, and not everybody went to Afghanistan is a bad person.
So you say it's not a problem for Libya in the future?
Libya will face a lot of problems. One of the problems will be any fanatic groups, any extremist groups. But there is, Libyan people are determined to not allow to any militant groups, either from left or right, to govern or to affect the Libyan life.
Okay.
And this is what we see it in our election. The election will tell the real story of Libya.
Okay, we must move on. Let's move on to some more clips. The calls you're about to hear. Gaddafi talks strategy with the three main characters: his son Saif al-Islam, his longtime henchman Taib al-Safi, and his prime minister al-Baghdadi. Well, once again, informants play an important role, calling in important information from within tribal circles.
It might be a new Libya, but any decision made here is still tied to old allegiances. There is no escaping the power of the tribes.
It's the tribes that brought down Gaddafi. The youth who fought are from the tribes. If we had not agreed and given our blessings, not one person would have gone to the front line.
The meeting is about what degree of autonomy the East should have from the central government. eastern tribes are putting their weight behind calls for a federal system in the new Libya.
Tribal politics were hugely important for the former regime as well. The audio recordings we have prove exactly that. Gaddafi and his inner circle spent hours discussing who was with them, who was against them, and how they could play one against the other.
أول مرة العواقير كلهم متذمرين طبعا من القصة إنهم ما حصلوا شيء في المجلس هذا. نجحهم ويتعمق الخلاف اللي بينهم. هذا رأى العواقير كانت تحرك غلط. العواقير كويسين وجل موقفهم كويس معنا عرفتوا. خليه خلبط لهم المعادلة مرة واحدة لما يبدأ معنا مثلا هذه العواقير وهذول العبيدات كقبائل وكذا يبدأ الوضع صارت خلقية كبيرة من الناحية الاجتماعية.
Al-Abidat and Al-Awagir are two major eastern tribes. The regime knew it needed the support of both to regain control of the east.
There were three situations. Gaddafi first talked about us, and our resolve to fight him became stronger. Then he asked us to march towards Benghazi, and we refused. Finally, he called on us when the army was approaching Benghazi, and we decided to fight.
The defection of General Abdel Fattah Yunus to the rebels only 5 days into the conflict was a huge blow to Gaddafi and had major tribal implications.
Abdel Fattah had three roles: Minister of Interior, head of the Special Forces, and member of the Obadat tribe. His defection affected all of these things, and it meant that the Obadat tribe had switched sides.
The audio recordings also reveal why opposition forces had such a struggle when they tried to push towards the west. They lacked full tribal support in many areas along the coastal road.
عندك المغاربة الغربيين جماعة النوفلية ومغاربة كحيلة مغاربة بن جواد ومغاربة راس الأنوف ونقدر نروح حتى مغاربة بشر وما عندهمش مشكلة وما خشوش هالمواضيع ولا تدخلوا فيهن وما مستردين عليهم جواد هديت هدي طلعوهم جواد ولين قاعدة فيها المجموعة والفلة والمجموعة من ولاد سليمان ويطهروا في المدينة عرفتوا؟ وهم زادوا لقدام وتو جاء دعم جيش وتو كيف خطب عليه راهو فايت وصلنا ل كويس اليوم حوالي 3000 يعني صرت بكره ان شاء الله بكره ان شاء الله الليله في الليل اتوقع يوصلوا الاربعه يزيدوا شويه ايوه بعدين نبدا في البرنامج العمل بتاع.
The areas they were talking about remained under Gaddafi control until NATO's airstrikes intensified late last summer.
Very soon, the Gaddafi government felt the impact of sanctions and was running out of cash. But they never held back when it came to ensure the loyalty of the tribes, even at a time when there was no money to pay for the expenses of their own people.
ما نقدر نخلوا كل الناس معنا. اللي بيدفع بقى يتفضل، احنا قاعدين نشد وشاو. موضوع المناطق عدد بتاعها والقيمة المالية بتاعها. السيارات. الأعلام ومصروفات تدريبية وكذا غيرها وصلوا إلى تقريبا 1,000,000.
Gaddafi was personally involved in organizing such meetings. He knew that winning tribal support was the only way for him to survive.
When you strengthen your relations with the tribes, you weaken your enemies. It was a tactic. Politically and internationally, it was very important. It was the only solution.
Gaddafi then asked for another major rally in the western town of Zliten. Pulling this off was crucial for the regime's top members. Just listen to how much anxiety it caused them.
نقرأ في برقية على امبارح توجيهتني. يقولوا أن الذين تم إرسالهم إلى زليتن يعيشون أوضاع مأساوية بزليتن حيث لم يقدم لهم أي وجبة منذ إرسالهم إلى هناك ولم يتم صرف أي مبلغ مالي لهم تأمين الأكل والشرب ولم يتم تسليحهم إلا بسلاح مسدس وقد تعرض بعضهم للهجوم عليهم من قبل المخربين حيث جرح ضابطان الشرطة وقد ينتج عن هذا الوضع هو أما فرار عدد كبير من تلك الجموع والعودة إلى منازلهم أو أنهم يقدمون لقتل جماعي هدية العصابات المسلحة وتركهم أمام خيار الموت أو الانضمام إلى تلك العصابات.
مليون دينار مرة واحدة هتتولهم ايش بندري لهم مقلة واخذينها معاه هذا يا سيدي ناكل الليلة يعطوهم اللي يجيبوا باي الليلة توصلهم كل شيء
يبارك فيك
باي أنت ما راح تسلحهم بس.
However hard they tried, their efforts failed to produce the results the regime so desperately needed.
Gaddafi's acute understanding of the tribal dynamics did not save him. He is gone, but the tribal structure remains and is as important as it was. Any ruler in the new Libya will have to keep a balance between all these tribes to ensure peace and stability.
And although it might have been NATO that dealt the final blow, it was tribal politics that ultimately defined the war.
So, Mahmoud Shuman, why was it, do you think, that Gaddafi lost the support of the tribes?
First of all, the Libyan tribe through history was a power of positive, not a power of negative. They fought the Italians. We used the tribe system to fight the Italians through 30 years of struggling. And when we come to this revolution, we could not find any other organization which will help to organize people and develop the struggle to the victory.
Right,
and
but there were many tribes who did support Gaddafi. So how did the NTC as an organization set about trying to garner their support?
Most of the Libyan tribes support the revolutions. Okay.
And those that didn't?
Some of them has allied with his tribe and they supported Gaddafi. But the situation, don't look to the situation like this. Look at the situation that in the absence of any political and social structures, which include political organization, civil society organization, there is a vacuum. And the only way to fill this vacuum by encouraging the tribes to play some political role. And this is temporary role, because when we have, after the...
So you were kind of bartering, if you like, a potential political office?
Not really, it's a bridge. It's a bridge to develop our system, to be a multi-party system, to be a political organization, and etc. And when we reach to this point, the role of the tribe as a social important element in our society will exist and will stay maybe forever. But at least for now, the tribes are playing a very positive role. And the case I'm always try to emphasize here, the case of الشهيد عبد الفتاح يونس. When some people bet, and the Gaddafi regime bet that the tribe, العبيدات tribe, will try to act in a way show its anger and etc. etc. What happened that the statement issued by العبيدات tribe and the statement issued by all eastern part of Libya tribes was very positive and very mature, and this has lead to unified the front in very critical time.
Mahmoud Shuman, appreciate that. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. Well, it's been a remarkable insight into the thinking, the strategies, and indeed the emotions of the Gaddafi regime as the war unfolded. And you can listen to everything we've aired and more on our website at aljazeera.com. We've posted an interactive timeline that shows you what was happening on the ground in Libya and what top government officials were saying about it in private. You'll find a selection of the more interesting wiretaps there too. Just click on the link to Libya on the line. From me, Nick Clark, it's goodbye. Hello and welcome to the second part of this Al Jazeera News special, Libya on the Line, the War Retold. I'm Nick Clark. Al Jazeera has obtained the phone wiretaps of two members of Muammar Gaddafi's inner circle. The phones belong to this man, the Prime Minister al-Baghdadi al-Mahmoudi, and the long-time Gaddafi loyalist Tayyip el-Safi. Our team went through more than 12,000 intercepted conversations. The recordings took place during Libya's revolution and war between February and June of last year. Gaddafi himself calls in regularly. Listen to him now, plotting how to circumvent an embargo and profit from Libyan oil.
ايوه يعني النفط زي السلع المخدرات صحيح صحيح بنحاول واجدين مغامرين يعني يشغلونكم بتخفيض وهم مش بالحضر ما الحضر ما نشوف شبكات اكثر شيء
يتفاهموا معاه وبعدين يكلموا وزير الخارجيه البريطاني وبعدين فرنسا. انا شو قلت لهم؟ قلت لهم انتم قاعدين انتم طالبين باشياء، قولنا كيف الجرار، قولوا كيف تضمن الطرف الاخر يوقف. شنو التفاصيل الفنيه اللي كيف نحموا جيشنا، كيف نحموا مواطنينا، كيف نديروا، كيف نحفظ، يعني نبغوا تساعدونا في التفاصيل هذه.
ما قالوش كان النقاش اللي داير الآن؟
النقاش ضدنا رسمي انه هو الان كله على فرض حظر جوي وضمان ما يبوش يخشوا بنغازي هم، وبعدين كان خطاب القائد انه اعطى تعليمات على الهواء مباشره بان الجيش يخش بنغازي.
يقول لهم بيكلمكم على اساس
لا سيد الاسلام مش حيقبل.
انا حنكلمهم انا
قلت لك والله كويسين، انت تشجع فيهم وهم كويسين.
لا ماشيين كويس، ماشيين وبعدين حتى رعايتهم للنقاش الحوار اللي بيدور بيننا مع الناس معنا يكونوا كمراقبين فيهم ما ماشي.
إيه لا معقول، لا معقول.
احنا لو نقولها لك ترى اللي دايرينها احنا بس مش معلنين عليه، يعني البيانات اللي كانت نملكها من نادي الدستور فيصدوا هذا الدستور. صح؟ نادوا بحرية الصحافة، هذه حرية الصحافة. نادوا بالمجتمع المدني، هذا المجتمع المدني. قلت له بدري للأمين العام، قلت له آخرتها تعال جيب مراقبين. احنا حتى المدن اللي تقولوا انتم محتلين لا نحموا في المدنيين. الروس ماشي. معلش قلت لك انا بدري ضروري نبعثوا ناس لماليزيا واندونيسيا وسنغافورة والمناطق هذه. غصبا عنهم. لا تنباع، هي ما عندناش مشكلة، لكن زي ما قلت لك بدي ما احنا كدولة ما نبانش في الصورة لكن نحاولوا من خلال التجار والسماسرة هذا ممكن نديروا حاجة، يعني في مغامرين ممكن ضروري نشغلوا طرف القانون في الطريقة ضروري ننفذ.
There they are, the uncensored words of Muammar Gaddafi. All of Gaddafi's inner circle can be heard on the recordings. Let's take you through some of the characters. First up, Saif al-Islam, Gaddafi's son and heir apparent. He's the man who took charge of the reform plans that fell out of favour with the Libyan public. Listen to him now talking about how to deal with the opposition leader, Mustafa Abdel Jalil.
في قول ان عام صاحب جديد بيجي روما يوم الاثنين والثلاث، وهذه كويسه جيت روما، هذه كويسه طبيان روما في المافيات في جهد ممكن يندار هيك وفي جهد ممكن يندار هيك.
And in this next recording, Saif al-Islam raises the idea of human shields with the Prime Minister. Another major player is Tayyip el-Safi, one of the phone owners. He was close confidant of Muammar Gaddafi for at least 20 years. He's now in hiding in Egypt. And Gaddafi put him in charge of quashing the uprising in the east. And we hear him here speaking to the intelligence chief, Abdullah Sanusi, warning him about the handling of the uprising in Misrata.
هو عيب يا عبد الله، عيب الخبر هذا. والله كان الفروق راجع ماشيين يا عبد الله باتجاه مستديم.
Then Gaddafi's Prime Minister al-Baghdadi al-Mahmoudi, he's now in custody in Tunisia, where he fled after the regime collapsed. And the recordings document his often desperate efforts to garner international support, and that'll be the focus of much of this programme. We'll also be hearing from Khalid Qaim, the Deputy Foreign Minister, as well as a number of more mysterious callers taking part in the diplomatic drama. All right, let's now examine the recordings of Baghdadi al-Mahmoudi, the Prime Minister, during the unfolding diplomatic disaster in the first months of 2011.
He was a key member of Gaddafi's inner circle. Al-Baghdadi al-Mahmoudi stood by Gaddafi until the very end. But 1 month into the revolution, and it was clear whose side the world was on. Nearly a decade of détente was forgotten. The United Nations voted on Resolution 1973, a document that opened the door for NATO to attack.
الشركة مش هيقدر يضبط في العبد هذه الأمريكية.
طبعا أنا أبوه عبد شنو؟
يعني منت الصفاقة ومنت العمل.
والله لا حوشة ينحرق المفروض وأهله ينحرقوا. والله ينحرق نار كبيرة ونحطوا فيها أهله ونفسه. تقعد للتاريخ بس.
هذا يا سيدي ما كسبناه من السيد مصطفى الجديد. أجواءنا قاعدة تلعب الفرنسويين والطليان والأمريكان يراو فيها.
The Prime Minister led the regime's efforts to build a network of international allies. Even after the UN resolution was passed, there was still hope that the tide could be turned.
متاع الجابون ومتاع نيجيريا نبي ضروري يكلمني، كان تحصلوه كلموني حتى تو.
قلت لك تو كنت اتكلم في الالمان.
ايه.
قلت لهم احنا درنا رسائل ودرنا كذا، قالوا هذه كلها ما فيهاش تفاصيل. كيف بتديروا، كيف بتوقفوا، كيف آليات التوقيف. المهم قال لي الامور راهي سيئه ضدكم والمفروض تديروا حاجه بسرعه، واقترح علي قال لي ان تو وزير خارجيتكم يكلم وزير خارجيه المانيا